The 21st chapter of John's Gospel reveals something important about our spirituality. We are all in the same boat, and we are seasick. Let's examine the health of this early church, gathered in one boat, and see where we fit in. At first glance, we may think that it is nice the disciples are getting away for some R&R by fishing, after experiencing such a traumatic event like Jesus' crucifixion. No, rather they have returned to their former way of life, as if the resurrection made little difference in their lives. How often have we returned from a retreat or powerful spiritual experience, promising that we were a changed person, but then return to our former ways? Ever go to confession and repeat the same sin within a day? Did the joys of Easter, First Communion, or Confirmation ever wear off too fast? Then we are in this boat and seasick too. Then we realize that apart from God, our efforts are fruitless, like the disciples fishing. The first time Jesus met his disciples was on the shore of Galilee about 3 years earlier. He called Peter, Andrew, James, and John. "Come after me, and I will make you fishers of men." They immediately dropped their nets and walked away from their boat. When the risen Lord calls our soul, can we leave the kingdom that we have built? Will we return to it after we have followed him for some time like the disciples, as if it had no effect in our life? The risen Jesus called to them from the shore, "Children, have you caught anything to eat?" When we draw our finite energies and talents, apart from God who is infinite, don't expect a big catch. The spiritual life is about being allied to God, who is greater, and fishing where he sends us. His resurrection at Easter has opened a world of new possibilities for our lives. So Jesus directed their next move. Cast the net over the right side of the boat, and you will find something. And they were not able to pull it in because of the great number of fish. We are told the disciples caught 153 large fish. The best explanation for why St. John mentions this specific number is that it symbolizes the known species of fish at the time. Hence these fishers of men are reminded by their catch what the purpose of the church is: to evangelize the world. This is why we are called Catholic, meaning universal or all-embracing. Evangelization is not the work of a few bishops or priests alone. We are all fishers of souls. This is why Venerable Archbishop Fulton Sheen said that perhaps Jesus will ask us on Judgment Day, "Where are your children?" In other words, who did we tell about the joys of Christ or catch for Jesus? When the disciples reached the shoreline, Jesus had prepared a meal of fish and bread. Whenever Jesus prepares a meal for his disciples, think Eucharist. We cannot share in the body and blood of Christ if we remain out to sea, far from the risen Christ and where he exists in his church. John shouted from the boat, "It is the Lord." If we can spot the risen Christ like John, then point him out and steer the boat to the shore. Jesus desires to reconcile those who have strayed or forgotten the joy of knowing him. Interestingly enough, in Greek, this gospel says that Peter was fishing naked. Trying to improve his tan after being locked in the upper room for 2 weeks? Perhaps. But John, our gospel writer, always makes reference back to creation. Thus Peter symbolizes Adam, who once stood before God naked and without shame. Yet before diving off the boat and meeting Jesus, Peter puts on layers of clothing. Peter was not free from sin at this point, but rather denied Christ 3 times at his trial. When we are in a state of sin, we try to hide ourselves from God like Adam and Eve and cover over our sinful nature. If Jesus was not deterred by the stench of Lazarus' tomb, why would he be repulsed to approach our sinful nature? Peter must have been motivated to make it to his first confession, for he swam some 100 yards, 4 times the length of an Olympic swimming pool. Jesus then asked Peter to reaffirm his love 3 times. St. Therese of Lisieux said, "Love for God consumes us only in the measure of our self-surrender." Again, reading this exchange in Greek, we find Jesus calling Peter's love higher. Jesus asked Peter if he could agape love him, that is, practice godly love. All 3 times Peter answered that he could only philios love him, or be Jesus' friend. Peter at this point could not prioritize Christ above all else. Jesus, however, predicted a time when he would grow and practice godly love. When you were younger, you used to dress yourself and go where you wanted. But when you grow old, you will stretch out your hands and someone else will dress you, and lead you to where you do not want to go. Peter's life would end by being stretched onto a cross, and his love would be perfected. Our love for Christ can be perfected in our sufferings. If we are tired of being spiritually seasick, St. John's Gospel reminds us to stay in the boat of the church. Apart from Christ, we can do nothing. We are all fishers of souls, and Christ has prepared the best meal for us in the Eucharist. And allow yourself to be reconciled by Christ's love. For the Trappist monk Thomas Merton said, "All the good that you will do will come not from you, but from the fact that you have allowed yourself to be used by God's love."